We need new energy. This is obvious, but let me emphasize it. The world needs more energy. We can and should be better at conserving energy. We must continue to become more efficient. Understand, efficiency and conservation are two different things. To save time, I'll talk about them together. Personally, I'm a big proponent of greater efficiency. For example, I believe my fusion power plant designs will be very efficient. And the purpose of my second patent, which I don't have time to talk about, is to enable us to make a new type of superconductor, hopefully the so-called room temperature superconductors. Both of my patents have the potential to greatly improve efficiency. However, conservation and improved efficiency is not enough. Around the world, billions of people need new sources of energy. Conservation is not enough. Don't confuse conservation with new energy. They are completely different. Conserving energy in rich countries will not help the needs of the people in poor countries. Conserving energy is not like making new energy. For example, you can't take energy conserved here in Minnesota, bottle it up somehow, and then send it to the people in the African country of Niger, people that need new energy. Around the world, millions of people have no sources of energy at all. Around the world, billions of people have only minimal sources of energy. There is no doubt about it. All around the world, poor people need new energy. To meet the world's demand for energy, we don't want to build coal power plants. I've heard estimates like China needs to build one new coal power plant every week to meet demand. I don't know if that's true or not. If it is true, then just imagine how much pollution that would create. To me, that sounds horrible. There is no doubt about it. There is a tremendous pent-up demand for energy around the world. Here's a related thought. In the United States, it just doesn't make sense, economic sense, to simply close older power plants just because they burn coal, without first having new sources of energy in the wings, at the ready, so to speak. Keep in mind, if we build fusion power plants at a fast enough rate, a rate faster than our growing energy needs, then we can decommission our older, less desirable power plants without facing any of the negative economic impacts. While coal mining will slow down, keep in mind there still will remain a demand for coal. Coal will still have important roles. However, these roles will not involve generating electricity. They will not involve releasing massive amounts of pollution into the atmosphere. Fusion completely changes the economics of energy. In my opinion, utilities that make electricity by burning coal will want to build fusion power plants in order to transition away from coal, to reduce emissions, and to become more profitable. Let me ask a few obvious questions. First, what is our environmental strategy? When you think about it, the United States does not have one. Is our strategy to force the poor people around the world to stay poor? Must the poor people around the world stay poor just because some people in wealthy countries don't want the pollution created by their new coal power plants? Do we have the right to force another country to not build new coal power plants? Do the wealthy, do the elite, do the environmentalists, does any group in places like the United States or Europe have any right to force the people in poor countries or any country around the world to not build a new coal power plant? For a moment, forget about forcing the poor to stay poor. Is our environmental strategy to force ourselves to become poor? Do the wealthy, do the elite, do the environmentalists, does any group have the right to insist that Americans become poor? This is a bad environmental strategy anyhow. I invite you to notice wealthy countries seem to protect their environment much better than poor countries. Prosperity is good for the environment, not bad. Fusion energy is the key to improving the environment. Not only is fusion energy the key to improving the environment, it finally gives us some basic control over the climate. Keep in mind, if I can get enough funding, my timetable for fusion energy is only 3 years. If it is possible to have fusion energy in only 3 years, then we need a completely new environmental strategy. What is it? It is simple. It is obvious. What should our environmental strategy be? We should use fusion energy to grow plants. Grow plants. Megatons of plants. Grow plants. That should be the world's new environmental strategy. It sounds simple. It is simple. However, the details are very sophisticated. But we don't need to analyze the details now. In the final part of this film, I will give you a much better insight into this strategy. I apologize for blasting you with this emotional trigger. However, we must face facts. Without fusion energy, eventually wars are going to break out as countries fight over the dwindling carbon energy resources. This transition has already started. As this transition deepens, people will worry less about the environment and more about survival. This is completely predictable. There are many historical examples. The world has a long history of wars. Some wars have started over religion. Some wars are started by people that hunger power. Many wars have been fought over scarce resources, like over water. For example, the agonizing Darfur conflict that has been dragging out in Sudan, Africa, is really a conflict over water. Later in this film, the Darfur conflict will come up again. As you'll see, I have an amazing idea that might help put an end to this conflict. As carbon energy runs out, countries will hoard their carbon resources. The United States is already hoarding its energy resources. You have to admit it. It just makes sense for us to do so. The drawback to this is our hoarding has increased the overall environmental damage in the world. This is not the fault of big oil. Ironically, it is the fault of U.S. environmentalists. Let me explain. Instead of us harming our own environment a small amount, other countries are harming their environment much more in order to sell us their oil. I don't understand the strategy of the environmentalists in the United States. When it comes to oil, they appear very selfish from the point of view of the overall world environment. Overall, their strategy has dramatically increased how much the United States is hoarding its oil. In my opinion, U.S. environmental controls on drilling for oil are very good. For example, the average person does not know that oil is being safely and cleanly drilled in the middle of Hollywood. For a simple but dramatic visual comparison on drilling for oil, do an image search on the Baku oil fields, then the Kuparuk oil field. Personally, I would rather see minimal environmental damage here in the United States than to see massive environmental damage in other countries. I would rather see the oil that is used in the United States coming from our U.S. oil and coal, resources that are drilled and mined from U.S. oil fields and coal fields, following U.S. environmental controls, drilling and mining in an environmentally friendly manner. We are hoarding the oil off our own coastlines. We are hoarding the oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Think of it from this point of view. Instead of using our own oil first, we are first using up the oil from Canada's Athabasca oil sands, and that is far more damaging to the world's environment than drilling in ANWR. From what I can see, the U.S. environmentalists involved in oil drilling have been embarrassingly selfish. Selfish from the point of view of the world's environment. Eventually, Canada will realize that it's not smart to export their oil. Eventually, every country will realize they need to hoard their carbon energy resources. As carbon resources dwindle, countries will go to war over them. Personally, I like wind and solar. However, I am realistic about their limitations. Wind and solar simply cannot replace carbon fuels. Further, it would not be wise to even attempt to do so. I had created an extensive example that explained why. However, the example required too much time, so I had to delete it. Fusion energy is unique. All by itself, fusion energy can safely replace over 80% of all carbon fuels without even breaking a sweat. As an added bonus, there will be far fewer fusion power plants than wind turbines or solar panels. It's because of that E equals mc squared thing. The value of the speed of light squared is a huge number. Fusion creates magnitudes more energy than wind or solar. Thus, we'll need far fewer fusion power plants. They will have much smaller footprints, and they can even be buried underground, safe from debilitating storms and out of sight. When it comes to war over energy resources, there is only one energy resource that nations do not need to fight over. It is fusion. Every country can have enough fusion energy. Let me mention a couple of details about fusion fuels. First, many of the fusion fuels are cheap and can be very easy to obtain. The most common type of fusion fuel is a type of water, a type of heavy water. Here is a vial I purchased online. Is it safe? Yes, I ordered it online. It is not expensive. In fact, it is cheap. It came through the mail. I let it sit out on my desk. No worries. The mercury in compact fluorescent light bulbs is far more dangerous. This is safe. Every country has access to enough of this kind of water to power their fusion power plants for thousands of years. Nations will not need to go to war over fusion fuel. Second, there are other types of fusion fuels. They include helium, lithium, boron, and nitrogen. Now, granted, some of the best isotopes are very rare. However, when you consider the fusion fuel resources in the world's oceans and in space, finding enough fusion fuel will never be a problem. In summary, we need new energy. We need clean energy. We need a new source of energy that will be available to every country. We need fusion energy. Every country can have enough fusion energy. It truly is the silver bullet to the world's energy problems. Fusion is the energy silver bullet. Fusion energy is our best source of energy.